We can now bring in Sean Safford, Associate Professor at SciencePo here in Paris. Great to have you with us here on France 24. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with the Senate, but it does look like Republicans will be taking control of the House. How is that going to impact the president's agenda for the next 2 years?
It'll depend quite a bit on how big the majority the Republicans get in the Senate, in the House. For the moment, it looks like they're going to get a very narrow majority, which means that, as in the past, we've seen the Republicans have had a very difficult time with their own caucus in the House of Representatives. It's been very difficult to get the more Trumpian Republicans in line with the more centrists. In general, of course, this is going to make Biden's job much more difficult, but whoever becomes the Speaker of the House will also have a very difficult job keeping their group together on the right.
The White House is feeling vindicated. Biden, once again yesterday, said he intends to run again in 2024. Democrats won on his agenda for the most part, but they didn't really want to be seen with the president on stage with them. He did very little campaigning. So it's a complicated one, isn't it, for him?
For Biden, the election was very good, but certainly his path forward as a candidate and as president in the next 2 years is certainly complicated. But that said, certainly he will benefit from what has happened in the last few days. Losing the House will not help his agenda, but already it's been difficult for him to get his agenda through with the Senate so closely divided. So what I can say is that I think Biden will continue to struggle, but what happened in the last couple of days did not hurt him.
Biden is 79 years old. In 2 years' time, he's going to be 81. Is there no one younger within the Democratic Party? I know the vice president is fairly unpopular, so that rules her out. Who else is there?
I wouldn't rule out Kamala Harris completely. I think she's not likely to be the next nominee should Biden run, but she has a constituency, and that constituency, certainly the Democratic Party is a coalition of different constituencies. And so you need to be able to put together black voters in the South with, educated suburban voters in the Northeast. Kamala Harris has not been doing great. The other candidates that everybody knows, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders,
too far left.
Also both perhaps too far left, but also quite old. So it's been difficult to see. There's of course Pete Buttigieg, who ran in the last in 2020 and did quite well. He won in Iowa. Biden made him the transportation secretary, which of course means he's been doling out a lot of money to people around the country. Yep. He could potentially run, but I think the person who comes out of this election, sort of the dark horse, the traditional sort of feeder into the presidency has been the governorships, and so Gretchen Whitman out of Michigan won her election, did extremely well, and is in some ways positioned as probably one of the few people under 60 to have some buzz.
I want to talk about, policies, Democratic policies, because let's talk about John Fetterman, for instance. He won his Senate race despite suffering a stroke during the campaign. Is it important for Democrats to find someone like John Fetterman who's relatable, who's likable, when it wants to sell these liberal policies? Is that important to have a white man doing it?
Oh, well, that's an interesting way to put it. I think in general, one thing that we take away from this election in general is that the quality of the candidates really mattered. So, where you have people who are not relatable, who are a bit less interesting, those candidates have done poorly.
But for example, with Fetterman, even though he has all these liberal policies which he's selling, he doesn't come across like a professor because he's in a hoodie and he's tattooed. People think he's one of them, whereas Elizabeth Warren can come across like a teacher, and she's amazing, but she's schooling people.
Yeah, well, as a professor, it does make me a little sad to see that being a professor at Harvard does make you a little bit less electable. I think, of course, it's important for any politician, and John Fetterman certainly has that in spades, to be relatable, before his stroke, he was very good at communicating, and I'm hopeful. I think everybody else is hopeful, left or right, that he will get back his ability to communicate in the way that he did before.
Let's talk about someone we haven't mentioned this far, and it's Donald Trump, because he's being pressured to delay his planned announcement for a 2024 run until after the Georgia runoff now. Media outlets, which used to be quite favorable to Donald Trump, seem to have turned against him and are now, we're gonna put something up for you of the New York Post, actually, calling him Dumpity Trump or something. Has the time come for Donald Trump to step aside, or is he still going to be the one calling the shots for the Republican Party? They're behind you.
Yeah, it's certainly, the election was horrible for Donald Trump, and it was very good for Ron DeSantis. And the reason why is that Donald Trump, I think, still has a very strong hold on the party. People are fascinated with him, and a lot of people within the Republican Party really believe in what he has to say. But since the 2020 election finished, Donald Trump has had a hard time thinking about anything other than his fixation on the idea that the election should have gone to him. People like Ron DeSantis have picked up on his nationalism, on his on his culture war identity, and have picked up the mantle of that sort of thing. And so I do think that Donald Trump has turned off a lot of people within the party, and certainly now the way that the Senate is playing out, if Nevada goes to the Republican side and Georgia really does become the linchpin once again, the idea of having Donald Trump insert himself once again, as he did in 2020, which clearly was what pushed that Georgia election towards the Democrats, will really make a lot of Republicans nervous.
Well, it could do two things, right? It could either push the Democrats to go out and vote more, or it could actually galvanize the Republicans. So it's a double-edged sword getting Donald Trump involved. But is Ron DeSantis the main person to block Trump? Because he sort of in the past suggested that he wouldn't run if Donald Trump ran, and now Donald Trump says he's going to release information on Ron DeSantis. I don't know what information he's got on him. It seems, Donald Trump has information on everyone, including the French president's sex life. So is he the one to block Donald Trump?
As with any American primary election, there will be sort of two channels, two routes to fill. Donald Trump is going to try to fill one, but it's not very clear that he's going to be able to take it up. Ron DeSantis, I think, is the best position to take up the Donald Trump mantle, but we'll see also on Monday, Mike Pence is giving an interview on ABC News. It's very widely assumed that he is also interested and he will want to catch some part of that. Ted Cruz from Texas is a perennial entrant on the right side. But I do think DeSantis is the best positioned, even better than Trump. We'll see how that plays out. Anybody who's going to win that nomination is going to have to knock off Trump. And if anybody can do it, it's going to be DeSantis. The real question will be then who runs on sort of the more moderate side. And this election in the last couple of days elevated a couple of governors who are more moderate. Brian Kemp from Georgia, Sununu from New Hampshire. He wasn't in the running, but the governor from Virginia. All of these are seen as more center of the road kinds of Republicans, sort of normal Republicans. So we'll see how this plays out over the next couple months.
Sean, thank you very much for that. We're going to have to leave it at that. Thank you, Sean Safford there.